They say Alaska never forgets who it swallows. The snow remembers footsteps long after the body is gone. The wind carries voices, half ghost, half memory. And I've learned one thing from this land. It doesn't kill you out of cruelty. It kills you because it doesn't care. My name is Freya Calder, climatologist and lead researcher for Project Borealis, a 6-person team sent to monitor atmospheric shifts near Denali National Park. We were studying permafrost melt data, atmospheric carbon capture rates, and how the storms were changing faster than our models could explain. But none of that mattered the night they left me to die. It was supposed to be a routine run, just me and 2 others collecting samples from the ridge before the incoming blizzard hit. The readings were off the charts, CO2 spikes in patterns we hadn't seen before. "Freya, this data could change everything," Sam had said, his breath fogging in the freezing air. He smiled that kind of smile you only give someone you think is about to change the world with you. I didn't know that smile would be the last kindness he ever gave me. By 9 p.m., the wind started howling like something alive. Visibility dropped to nothing, a white wall swallowing sky and ground alike. I radioed the base. "This is Freya, I'm losing visibility. Copy?" Static, then silence. I called again, nothing. When I turned around, the snow had erased their tracks. Sam and Kira were gone. Gone. I shouted their names until my throat bled, the wind swallowing every word. The snow hit like shards of glass, each flake cutting deeper than the last. Somewhere between panic and realization, my mind split open to a single icy thought. They didn't get lost. They left. Hours later, I stumbled back toward base, blind, freezing, half delirious. The storm clawed at me, tearing at my coat, my sanity, my breath. The world turned white, then gray, then black. When I finally reached the outpost, the door was open. Inside, the lights flickered. Half the power gone. Their bunks were empty, their gear gone. The lab computers wiped. My data drives missing. The entire 3-year study gone, stolen. They'd taken everything, even the evidence that I'd let it. On the terminal screen, one line glowed in green text. A message left in the command log. "Sorry, Freya, couldn't wait. You understand." Understand. I sank to the floor, shaking, the sound of the storm outside merging with the static in my head. For a long moment, I couldn't tell if I was crying or if the snow had followed me in. Every heartbeat echoed with the same question. Why? Was it jealousy, greed, fear? It didn't matter. All that mattered was that they'd taken my life's work and left me for dead in the dark. And somewhere deep beneath the layers of grief and shock, something colder than the storm began to wake up inside me. A quiet, deliberate, merciless thought. I'll survive this, and when I do, they'll wish I hadn't. Outside, the wind screamed against the walls like a living thing. Inside, I sealed the door, wrapped myself in emergency blankets, and wrote down the last data points from memory. If this was the end, it would not be nameless. If I died here, the record would remain. But I wasn't going to die, not yet. Not until I made them remember my name. The storm didn't stop for 3 days. I lost count after the second sunrise. Not that the sun ever truly rose. It just smeared gray light across the endless white, like someone erasing the world with frost. Inside the research outpost, the temperature dropped below 0 even with the generator running. Half the fuel had been taken with them. The rest, maybe enough for a week if I rationed. But food wasn't the problem. Breath was. Hope was. And the silence. The silence was worse than the cold. I used to love silence. As a scientist, it meant concentration, precision, the hum of thought. But now it was the kind of silence that stared back at you, asking, "Why are you still alive?" I talked to myself to keep my sanity, recorded voice memos, hoping someone, anyone, would hear them someday. Log entry, day 1 since the storm. Subjects Sam and Kira missing. Possibly intentionally. My voice cracked. Correction, abandoned. Data stolen. Project compromised. I tried to sound like a professional researcher. Instead, I sounded like a ghost documenting her own disappearance. By the 4th day, I stopped crying. Not because I stopped hurting, but because crying froze faster than tears could fall. My fingers were cracked and swollen, my lips split open. I'd been using one of the sample heaters to melt snow for water, scribbling equations on napkins, anything to keep my brain from slipping into the white void outside. And then I found it. In one of the backup servers, hidden behind system logs, A single folder Sam hadn't deleted. Inside, raw sensor data. Incomplete, corrupted, but mine. The blizzard had shifted the magnetic field. I could see it in the readings. It wasn't just weather. It was a phenomenon no one had ever documented. And they'd stolen the discovery. I remember whispering into the frozen air. You took my name, but not my proof. That night, I dreamed of warmth, a fire, a voice whispering my name, soft and cruel. You understand, Freya. Sam's voice, that same phrase from the terminal. I woke up screaming, clutching my side. A fever, maybe, or just fury turned physical. Outside, the storm still howled, pressing against the walls like it wanted to hear me break. I didn't break, I talked back. You hear me, Alaska, I shouted into the white. You can bury me, but I'll crawl back through your ice. My breath froze midair. The wind took my words and threw them into the dark. And for a second, I swear, it howled back. By the end of the week, my generator sputtered out. The lights dimmed to a faint orange, like dying embers in a snowstorm. I sat by the last heat source, staring at my reflection in a shard of ice. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who arrived here. Her eyes were hollow, her cheeks bruised by wind, but her stare unflinching. That night, I stopped being Dr. Freya Calder, lead researcher. I became something else. Not the victim they'd left behind, not the corpse they'd expected to find, but the thing that comes back after death refuses you. I packed a small sled with essentials, canned food, flares, 2 remaining data drives, and my old field journal. The wind had eased, the snow finally slowing to a hush. In the pale morning light, I stepped outside, the world shimmering in silent hostility. The cold hit like knives, but I didn't care. Every breath hurt, every step bled, but I walked anyway. Because somewhere beyond this white emptiness, there were 2 people who thought they'd gotten away. And when I reached them, they'd learned the same thing the blizzard had taught me. The dead don't freeze easily. It's strange what the mind does when it's alone for too long. It stops thinking in words, starts dreaming in instincts. Every morning, I woke to the sound of wind scraping against the frozen earth. Every night, I fell asleep to the same sound. It became my pulse, my punishment, my teacher. The world had turned white, but my thoughts burned red. I pulled the sled behind me, boots sinking knee-deep with every step. The cold bit through the seams of my jacket, through my gloves, into the marrow of my bones. The horizon was endless, a canvas of nothingness stretching forever, but I kept walking. North, toward the research hub in Anchorage, where they'd have to pass through eventually. If I made it there, I'd have proof. If I didn't, I'd die, knowing I was still coming for them. That was enough to keep me moving. On the 3rd night, I found an abandoned ranger cabin, half buried in snow, its windows shattered, its door hanging by a single hinge. Inside, I found a rusted stove, some canned beans frozen solid, and miraculously, a radio. I hooked it up to my spare battery, turned the knob, and waited. Static, then more static, then frequent blizzard conditions in the Denali perimeter. Search and rescue teams grounded. I almost laughed. No one was coming, not for me, not for anyone. I whispered into the microphone anyway. This is Dr. Freya Calder, Project Borealis. If you can hear this, I'm alive. Silence. Then the static deepened into something low, almost like breathing. I froze. A voice came through, faint, distorted. Freya? It sounded like Sam. My blood turned to ice. Sam, I said, gripping the mic. You bastard, where are you? No response. Just that same hollow whisper. You understand. I ripped the cord out of the battery. The silence that followed was worse. That night, I dreamed of the day we first arrived in Alaska. The helicopter blades cutting through snow. Sam holding my hand as we stepped onto the tundra. He'd said, "It's beautiful, isn't it? Like the edge of the world." He was right, but he'd forgotten one thing. At the edge of the world, there's nowhere left to run. By morning, my supplies were running low. My left hand was frostbitten. But I found something, tracks, snowmobile marks, half covered but fresh enough. I knelt and brushed the snow away. 2 sets of prints, one lighter, Kira, one heavier, Sam. They'd passed through here recently, headed east. My breath came out in clouds as I whispered, "You left me to die, but I'm still coming." The weather turned against me again. White walls, roaring wind, the kind that makes you doubt your own direction. I tied a rope around my waist. anchored it to the sled, and moved blind through the storm. Every few steps, I counted out loud, not for navigation, but for sanity. 1, 2, 3. At 50, I stopped. Something dark moved in the whiteness, a shape, tall, still, watching. "Hello?" I shouted. No answer. Then it moved, closer, slow. I grabbed the flare gun. My hands shook as I aimed. The flare exploded, bathing the snow in red light. There was no one there, just shadows of trees and the blizzard twisting between them. I lowered the gun and laughed, hysterical. "See, Freya," I muttered. "Even ghosts can't stand this cold." When the storm finally broke, I collapsed near a frozen creek, my breath ragged, vision blurry. I must have passed out because when I opened my eyes, the sky had turned violet, twilight reflecting on ice. I felt something warm on my face, not sunlight, blood. My nose was bleeding from the cold. I wiped it, smearing a streak of red across my gloves, across the snow. Red on white. For the first time in days, it looked beautiful. I whispered to the wind, "I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm remembering." The silence around me held its breath, as if listening. "You stole my work, you stole my name, now I'll take yours." As night fell again, I lit a single flare, just to see the red burn against the dark. It illuminated the snowmobile tracks one more time, stretching into the horizon. I smiled, teeth aching from cold and anger. "I'm coming for you, Sam, and when I find you," the flare hissed out. Darkness swallowed me whole. "You'll wish the storm had finished what it started." By the time I reached the foothills, the snow had stopped pretending to be beautiful. It wasn't a landscape anymore. It was a graveyard that hadn't decided who to bury yet. The air burned my lungs. My legs shook with every step. But the tracks ahead, they kept me alive. Sam and Kira's snowmobile trails snaked across the ice, leading toward the abandoned mining zone, the one we'd marked as off-limits during our first week here. Toxic gas leaks, unstable tunnels, radiation pockets. But that was before betrayal meant more than death. Now, I'd rather choke on the fumes than let them get away. By noon, I found signs of camp. Burnt wood under snow, a scrap of fabric, Kira's jacket lining, I'd know it anywhere. And near it, a metal flask engraved with initials, SK. My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened the flask, whiskey, still half full. I took a sip. It burned down my throat, harsh and raw. The taste brought memories flooding back. Laughter in the lab, Sam clinking that same flask against mine. Here's to the cold. May it freeze our failures before they spread. Now it just froze the truth. I sat there, staring at the flask, and felt something crack open inside me. Not grief, clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was justice. Because if I didn't make them pay, no one ever would. No one would know the truth. And I refused to let my discovery, or my name, die buried under snow and lies. That night, I made shelter in the mouth of an old shaft. The darkness was so thick it felt alive, pressing against my skin. The wind outside wailed through rusted beams like a warning. Don't go deeper. But warnings mean nothing to the already damned. I lit my last flare, setting the walls aglow with a blood-red hue. Symbols and notes still etched on the metal, remnants of some earlier research team. Among them, scratched in the rust, I saw it. FC 120233. My initials, Freya Calder. But I hadn't been here before. I blinked hard. Maybe the cold was making me hallucinate, or maybe this place had been waiting for me. The wind howled louder, then voices, distant, real. Two, a man and a woman. I froze. The echo bounced through the tunnel like ghosts. "We'll rest here tonight," the man said. "She's not following us, Sam," the woman whispered. "She's dead." My heart stopped. "Good," he replied. "Then tomorrow we head south. By the time the funding board gets our report, no one will question who led the project." Their laughter cut through the dark like blades. I bit down on my glove to keep from screaming. They were less than 100 feet away, close enough to hear the echo of their betrayal again. I pressed my back against the frozen wall, my breath fogging the air. For the first time, I didn't feel cold. I felt purpose. I waited until their voices faded, then crept out of the tunnel. The wind had died down, leaving a silence so sharp it hummed. I watched their silhouettes vanish into the distance. Small, careless, warm. In my pocket, I still had the flask. Their flask. I unscrewed it, poured the whiskey into the snow, and whispered, "Your warmth ends here." The whiskey hissed as it hit the ice, evaporating in the cold. Like them, leaving nothing behind but a stain that would freeze before it vanished. I turned toward the horizon. The mining road curved ahead, the path to Anchorage. I could follow them easily now. But I didn't, not yet. Because before I exposed them, before I took back what they stole, I needed something they didn't. Proof that I had survived. Something undeniable. Something the world would have to believe, even if it didn't want to. I pulled out my recorder and pressed record. Log entry. Day 14. Freya Calder, Project Borealis. If you're hearing this, then you know the truth was buried. But not forever. I'm following them now. Their names are Sam Hart and Kira Holt. They took my work, my discovery, and tried to erase me. But I am still here, and I will make them remember me. The red light blinked once, then the battery died. But the words stayed. In my head, in the snow, in the air. And the storm listened. The next 3 days blurred into one. The sun didn't rise. It only pulsed through clouds like a dying heart. The cold wasn't just outside anymore. It lived in me. I had become part of the tundra, frozen, silent, moving because something inside refused to stop. Every few hours, I checked my compass, recalibrated bearings, and followed the faint line of the mining trail. Somewhere ahead, Sam and Kira were warm, fed, safe, talking about my discovery like it belonged to them. The thought alone was enough to keep my pulse steady. Midday on the second day, I spotted smoke. Thin, gray, barely visible. A campfire. I crouched behind a ridge, watching from a distance. 2 figures moved near a tent, bundled in heavy coats. Even through the haze, I knew that gait. Kira's slow, limping steps. Sam's posture. Confident, careless, alive. I should have run toward them, screamed, demanded answers. But that part of me, the naive Freya, had died in the outpost. Now I waited. They'd set up near a collapsed radio tower, scavenging equipment. I could hear fragments of their voices carried by the wind. "Once we reach the main line," Kira said, "we'll transmit everything. Borealis will make history." "We'll make history," Sam corrected. Freya was the mine, sure, but she lost it in the storm. My nails dug into my palm until I drew blood. Every word felt like another knife twisting under my ribs. I waited until nightfall before moving closer. The fire flickered low. Kira was asleep inside the tent. Sam sat outside, staring at his laptop screen, typing into the satellite link. The faint glow lit his face. Familiar, smug. I crept closer through the snow, every step silent, breath controlled. The wind was my cover, the darkness, my ally. Then I saw it. On the laptop screen, my research files, labeled under Sam Hart, lead author. My discovery, my data, my stolen life. Something in me broke completely, but the sound that came out wasn't a sob. It was a low laugh. Quiet, sharp, almost inhuman. Sam froze, looking up. "Hello?" he called, eyes narrowing into the dark. "Is someone there?" I stepped back, heart pounding, forcing myself to stay hidden. Not yet, not like this. I needed him to believe I was dead. Only then could the truth destroy him properly. When the wind shifted, I slipped away, circling around their camp. Behind the tent, their snowmobile sat half buried, fuel canisters strapped to the back. I took one, emptied half of it onto the snow, and used my knife to scratch 3 letters into the ice beside it. FC. When they woke up, they'd see it. And for the first time, they'd wonder if ghosts leave signatures. That night, I climbed to higher ground, where the frozen peaks overlooked the valley. Below, their campfire burned like a single red heartbeat in an ocean of white. I ate the last of my rations, melted snow for water, and opened my field notebook. The one they hadn't stolen. Page after page of my handwriting, warped from moisture, filled with equations, notes, and observations. But I added something new now. Not data, but words. Day 17. The hunt begins. I'm no longer surviving. I'm reclaiming. I didn't sleep. Instead, I listened to the wind move through the peaks, carrying faint echoes of laughter, or maybe just memory. Somewhere between exhaustion and purpose, I started speaking to the storm like it was listening. "You tried to kill me. They tried too, but I'm still here." The wind answered with a howl so low it felt like a heartbeat beneath the ice. "Then help me," I whispered. "Help me take back what they stole." By morning, the wind calmed. unnaturally still, as if obeying. The world was quiet, waiting. I could see their trail now. Fresh snowmobile tracks leading southeast toward the highway. They were close. I strapped my sled, adjusted my scarf, and whispered to the empty air, "Let's finish this." Then I started walking again, slow, steady, unrelenting. For the first time, the cold didn't bite. It bowed. Dawn in Alaska isn't golden. It's blue. A cold, merciless kind of blue that reminds you the sun doesn't care who froze overnight. I'd been following their trail for almost 2 days. They were slowing down, maybe fatigue, maybe guilt. Either way, I was gaining. Every few hours, I saw fresh signs. Tire marks, scraps of foil from their rations, and once, a torn notebook page fluttering in the snow. I picked it up, Kira's handwriting. "Sam says we can't go back, says she's gone." I still hear her sometimes. The wind sounds like her voice. I smiled. Good, let her hear me. That night, I made camp inside the shell of an old weather station. Its walls creaked with age, but it still smelled faintly of machine oil and dust. Civilization in decay. I lit a small fire in a broken barrel, holding my hands near the flame. The heat hurt, but I needed the pain. It reminded me I still had a body, still had control. I looked down at my frostbitten fingers, at the split skin and blackened nails. They didn't look like a scientist's hands anymore. They looked like something carved out of ice, something the storm had remade. I found their satellite uplink in the corner, powered by a half-dead solar array. The battery was weak, but it might still hold enough for one message. I typed carefully, the keys stiff beneath my gloves. 2. Borealis HQ from Dr. Freya Calder. Message data compromised. Hart and Holt falsified records. I am alive. Evidence secured. Do not authorize publication until verification received. Before sending, I hesitated. If I pressed this button, they'd know I survived. Sam and Kira would hear it too. No, not yet. Revenge needed precision, not desperation. I deleted the draft. Instead, I opened the weather logs. Data stretching back 5 years. There it was again. The irregular magnetic anomalies I'd first documented. The storm that nearly killed me wasn't random. It followed a repeating pattern, an atmospheric pulse that matched fluctuations in Earth's core radiation signatures. A natural phenomenon? Maybe, but one no scientist had ever mapped, until me. The discovery that they'd stolen wasn't just data, it was history. And if I could replicate it, if I could record it again before they reached civilization, I'd have what they didn't. Proof. Proof of science, proof of betrayal, proof of resurrection. As I stared at the monitor, the screen flickered. For a second, I thought it was the weak power supply. Then, a voice, faint but unmistakable, came through the old transceiver. "Freya?" I froze. "Freya, if you're out there, this is Kira. Please, we didn't mean to." Static swallowed her words. My heart hammered. Part of me wanted to grab the mic, to scream, "You left me!" But another part, the colder, sharper part, whispered, "Let them think you're dead." Because guilt is a slower death than frostbite. By morning, the blizzard returned. Thick snow tore across the valley, blinding and beautiful. Through the white haze, I caught sight of their snowmobile tracks again. But this time, there was something else beside them. Another set of tracks, heavier, uneven, a third person, or something else. I crouched, tracing the impressions with my gloved hand, too large for Kira, too deep for Sam. And they weren't from my sled. Someone else was following them, or following me. That night, I slept with the flare gun loaded, my knife under my coat. The storm screamed outside, slamming against the walls, but underneath it, I swore I heard footsteps. Slow, measured. Then 3 knocks on the door. I didn't breathe. The wind moaned through the cracks in the roof, and then silence. I waited an hour before moving. When I finally stepped outside, there was no one there. Just snow and the faint shadow of boot prints leading away into the white. 3 steps, then gone. I stood there under the endless sky and whispered, "If you're coming for me, get in line." I knew now this wasn't just about revenge. Something deeper was moving here. Something the storm itself wanted me to finish. Because out here, in the endless white, truth doesn't stay buried. It freezes, preserves, waits. And maybe that's what I had become. Not Freya Calder, the scientist, not even Freya, the survivor, but the truth, walking. Snow speaks when you learn how to listen. It crunches differently beneath guilt, carries sound farther when fear is near. And that morning, the snow was whispering something new. I wasn't alone. The footprints were still there at dawn. Not Sam's, not Kira's. These were heavier, uneven, the stride too wide for either of them. Whoever it was, they'd been following for hours, maybe days. I crouched over the prints, tracing their edges with my glove. Fresh, less than an hour old, and heading the same way I was. For a moment, the world felt smaller, the wind stilled, the horizon closed in. It wasn't just me hunting anymore. Something else was circling the same prey. A rescue team? No rescuer moves like this. Too deliberate, too quiet. A mercenary maybe, or worse. The kind of person hired to clean up loose ends. And I was the loosest end of all. I moved faster, skirting the ridge, using the rock shadows for cover. Below me, I spotted smoke again. Sam and Kira's new camp. But near it, half hidden behind a snowdrift, was a third tent. Smaller, no lights, no movement. My breath fogged against the scarf as I whispered, "You're not alone anymore, Sam." Night fell early, swallowing the horizon whole. The moon was a blur behind thin clouds, pale, trembling. I waited until their fire died down, then crept closer. From the edge of the drift, I could see 3 figures now, Sam and Kira by the fire, and a third shape, standing in the dark just outside their camp, motionless. Kira turned suddenly, glancing into the black. "Sam," she whispered. "Did you hear that?" Sam looked up. Nothing. The third shape stepped back, disappearing into the snow. Neither of them saw. But I did. I stayed hidden, watching until their fire went cold. Then I moved toward the dark spot where the figure had been. No footprints, just disturbed snow, as if the storm had erased whoever stood there. I knelt, touching the ground. Still warm, someone had been here moments ago. My hand brushed against something half-buried. Metal, a knife, military issue. The initials carved into the handle read, AC. No one from my team had those initials. Whoever this was, they didn't belong to science. They belonged to cleanup. By dawn, the blizzard had returned, howling like a warning. I followed the prints east, where Sam's trail led toward the river. My sled creaked, every muscle screaming, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Somewhere behind me, I heard it, the rhythmic crunch of another set of boots, pacing mine perfectly. Step, step, step. I spun around, flare gun raised, nothing, only white. Then a voice, low, calm, too close. "You shouldn't be alive, Doctor." The voice wasn't Sam's. It came from behind me, right behind me. I turned. A shadow moved in the mist, broad-shouldered, face hidden beneath a snow hood. Before I could fire, the flare was ripped from my hand. We struggled, my knee hitting ice, my glove tearing. He pinned me down easily, his strength mechanical, practiced. "They paid me to find you," he said, "or what was left." I spat blood into the snow. "Tell them they'll get neither." I twisted, driving my elbow into his ribs. He grunted, staggered. I grabbed the flare gun and fired straight into his chest. The red blaze lit the world in a scream of color. He fell back, flames licking his coat, the snow hissing around him. When the light dimmed, he was gone. No body, only smoke, and 3 new footprints leading away. I collapsed beside the burning patch, gasping, shaking. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd killed him, or if the storm had simply claimed another soul. But one thing was clear now. Someone had paid for silence, and Sam and Kira weren't the only ones who betrayed me. There was a larger game, one that reached beyond research, beyond science, into something far colder. I looked up at the storm swirling above me and whispered, "Then I'll burn it all, every lie, every name, every hand that signed their funding check." The wind answered, soft, approving. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the consequence. I stopped pretending I was following them and started pretending they were following me. Tracks are honest things. They tell you speed, weight, and carelessness. And both Sam and Kira had been sloppy. The mining road narrowed where the river braided into a sheet of glass. Thin ice, old crevasses, and that special kind of silence that makes even the wind step lightly. Perfect place to make people forget how to balance power and hubris. I cached my sled behind a drift and walked the last stretch barefoot in boots, feeling the world in the soles of my feet. Cold teaches you a new kind of attention. Pain teaches you where you still live. I laid out tripwires of braided fishing line, anchored with shards of rebar and my knife. Crude, but deadly in an awkward fall. At dusk, I set a decoy. A torn jacket hung on a post and a fake heat signature. 2 chemical hand warmers wrapped in cloth so infrared might pick it up as body heat. If they circled the river looking for warmth, the jacket would draw them like moths. If the cleanup contractor, the third shadow, was as methodical as I thought, he'd check downwind first. Human nature is predictable when you're cold. I waited in a hollow, my breath a small red cloud between my gloves. Night in Alaska compresses sound into the chest. The world became a drum, and my heart beat its metronome. The first lights appeared, a dim headlamp, then another. The snowmobile's silhouette ghosted over the ice. They approached slow, proud, talking in whispers they thought the white couldn't carry. "We'll hit the main line by midnight," Sam said, voice a confident flatline. Kira sounded tired, guilty, but committed. "We have to, for the grant, for our names." They circled the decoy, close enough to hear the fabric rasp. I waited until the ugly shape of the third figure appeared. Silent, hulking, hood up, AC stamped on the knife he carried. He moved like a shadow with plans. When Kira brushed the jacket, the trip line sang. The snowmobile lurched as Sam tried to catch her balance. The line snagged the drive belt. The machine bit snow and grit and died with a sound like a throat closing. Panic in cold air is a thing you can taste. Kira swore. Sam cursed and crawled to the engine, hands fumbling. I stepped out then, breath steady, voice small and merciless. "Hello," I said. "Did you miss me?" Sam went pale. Kira's hand covered her mouth. The contractor froze, then moved, fast as winterlight. I had a flare in one hand and the knife I'd found by the tunnel in the other. The contractor lunged. I met him with noise and motion. We danced close and dangerous, the flare carving red arcs in the night. While they were tangled, I went for the snowmobile, pried open a panel, and found 3 drives tucked into a waterlogged pouch, Sam's handwriting on one. My fingers were clumsy in the cold, but I copied the contents onto a spare drive, reading as my hands bled. There were invoices, bank transfers, and an audio file, a board call recording, dry voices, legal tones, but one line like an icicle through my ribs. "We need Borealis secured. Patent first. Collateral damage is acceptable." They weren't just opportunists. They had orders. I played the audio again and again as if repetition could make it smaller. It only made it larger. The contractor broke free and grabbed Kira, slamming her to the ice. Sam lunged to help, and I fired the flare into the sky. A brilliant scream of light and smoke. Someone's tracker pinged then. A tiny chirp under the howl of the wind. Not mine, not theirs. A voice hissed over a shortwave. "Target acquired, hold position, extraction ETA 10. My throat closed. Extraction? 10 minutes to what? To the highway, to safety, to the lawyers who signed the checks. They'd hired cleanup because the stakes had grown too big for petty theft. They'd tied the theft to corporate weight. And in 10 minutes, something larger than Sam and Kira would arrive, bring judgment I hadn't planned for. I shoved the drives into my pocket, pushed the flare gun into Sam's face, and spoke slow, deliberate, certain. "You all have 2 choices. You tell me everything right now, or you die thinking the storm did me the kindness you couldn't." Sam's eyes were full of the small, brittle panic of a man finally understanding the architecture of his own cowardice. Kira sobbed into her jacket. The contractor laughed, a dry, horrible sound, because he knew there would be no moral victory left standing. Above us, a distant rotor noise began to cut through the black. Not a rescue helicopter. Something smaller, efficient, and merciless. My chest filled with cold and a fierce, lucid clarity. I had provoked a machine whose only job was to collect things that couldn't be left behind. I had the drives. I had the recording. But that ping had betrayed me, or given me a clock. A whine grew louder, then a shadow passed over the ice. A disk of matte black visible against snow, then gone. Kira looked up, eyes wide. "It's them. They've called it in." They had. Sam's hands shook, and the contractor smiled like a man with a receipt. I raised the spare drive and thumped it against the owner's pocket, hard enough that the contractor flinched. "One more lie," I said, "and your name gets frozen in every server that matters." He spat and said, slower now, "They told us the funding board, Arcturus, said secure the IP. Extraction would handle cleanup. Arcturus, a name like Frost. corporate cold, far from here. My fingers tightened around the drives. The flare hissed to an ember. The rotor noise was loud enough now to bruise the air. 10 minutes or less. I had to decide. Hold them and hope the world believed a battered woman with an implausible story. Or use the storm, the ice, the drives, to bury the ends and reveal the center at once. I stepped closer, letting the wind carry my voice like an accusation. Tell me everything, now. Sam started, words tumbling. The meeting, the transfer, the hush money, the promise of patents. Kira's voice broke into confession. She'd signed the manifest. She'd helped plan the route. The contractor listened and nodded, almost bored, until the rotor's shadow fractured the sky. As the black disk banked low, a new sound threaded through. Another radio, warmer, male, metallic. Hold pattern, we have a problem. Someone's on the ice. My heart lurching, I realized the problem was not that they'd come, but that they had someone else on the ground who knew my face. Footsteps came from the drift behind us, slow, measured, certain, not Sam's, not the contractor's. A voice, close enough that my teeth chattered at its breath. Freya Calder, you're far from the lab. I turned. The cliff of night framed a figure, not in contractor gear, but in a tailored parka with an emblem I didn't recognize. Clean, corporate, impossible in this place. He smiled, and the smile was the last warm thing the world would let me have before the cold took over. You've done well to come this far, he said. But the board wants this quiet. He stood under the shadow of the hovering craft, boots sinking slightly into the ice, breath forming perfect circles of fog that rose and disappeared into the floodlight above. Everything about him screamed control, from the pressed collar of his Arctic parka to the calm, almost amused expression that never flinched. Even as the blizzard clawed at his face. Dr. Freya Calder, he said, voice crisp, clipped, the cadence of someone used to being obeyed. You've made quite the mess. I didn't move. The flare gun was still in my hand, the blade in my coat. Behind him, the black rotorcraft hovered low, its sound pulsing through the ice like a living heartbeat. Sam and Kira crouched near the broken snowmobile, terrified, faces pale under the beam. The contractor stood off to the side, eyes cold, waiting for a signal. Who are you? I asked. Director Alan Crane, he said, almost politely. Compliance Division, Arcturus Industries. You've been a very expensive problem. The name hit like a hammer. Arcturus, the company funding Project Borealis, the one whose logo had been quietly removed from our reports before submission. We'd thought it was a shell sponsor, a faceless investor. But here it was, breathing in front of me. You paid them, I said slowly, to steal my work, to fake the data. He smiled faintly, to secure it. You were unstable, Dr. Calder. After the incident at the outpost, the board needed continuity. Your team provided that. I laughed, harsh, raw, almost breaking. Continuity? You left me to die in that storm. Collateral weather exposure, he corrected. Unfortunate, but you survived, which complicates things. The wind shifted, sweeping snow between us like a curtain. I could feel my pulse sinking with the rhythm of the blades overhead. Every instinct screamed to run, but I forced my voice steady. You think you can just erase me again? Crane stepped closer, his boots creaking on the thin ice. No, Dr. Calder. This time, you erase yourself. A tragic end. Lost researcher. Body unrecovered. The storm will do the paperwork for us. He nodded toward the contractor, who pulled a small black pistol from his jacket. Sam gasped. Kira sobbed quietly. I didn't blink. I took one step forward, the flare gun still hidden at my side. You've made one mistake, I said. Crane raised an eyebrow. Oh? You underestimated what survives in the cold. I flicked the flare trigger, aiming not at them, but at the ground. The flare hit the ice, igniting the thin layer of spilled fuel around the snowmobile. Fire roared upward, searing orange against the night. The contractor stumbled back, shouting, blinded by light. The rotorcraft jerked upward, trying to escape the heat. Chaos, noise, finally, my element. I dove for the fallen drives, grabbed Sam's laptop, and sprinted toward the ridge. Bullets cracked through the wind, but the blizzard swallowed sound faster than echo. My lungs burned, my vision tunneled. Behind me, Crane's voice sliced through the storm. She's not getting off this ice alive. Halfway up the ridge, I slipped, catching myself on a rock jutting through the snow. The drives clattered from my pocket, one sliding toward the edge. I lunged, catching it with numb fingers just before it vanished into darkness. Below, flames licked higher, smoke curling like a signal to gods long asleep. The rotorcraft circled once, spotlights sweeping the field, searching for me, for the ghost who wouldn't die. I pressed the recorder to my lips, breath ragged, voice trembling but unbroken. Log entry, day 21. If this is found, Arcturus Industries is responsible for falsifying Borealis research. They ordered my death. The files are proof. Don't let them bury the storm again. The ridge trembled under a new rumble, a low growl from the ice itself. Heat and pressure from the explosion had fractured the river sheet. Cracks spidered out like veins, spreading toward the camp. Crane looked up, realization dawning too late. The entire field was about to collapse. I smiled through the frost. Collateral weather exposure, right? Then the ground gave way. The ice split open with a scream, swallowing the wreck, the snowmobile, the fire, and Alan Crane's astonished face, into a dark, frozen abyss. I rolled backward, scraping my arm on jagged ice, pulling myself to safety. For a moment, silence returned. Pure, terrible, divine. Then only the wind remained. I lay there on the ridge, shaking, staring at the crater below. The flames had vanished. Only the snow moved now, gentle, endless, cleansing. I'd won, for now, but the drives in my pocket hummed like live hearts. The truth wasn't safe yet. It was alive. And so was I. When the fire finally died, the world turned blue again. No red, no noise, no warmth. Only that endless shade of frozen light that makes you question whether morning ever existed. I sat on the ridge, snow melting into my hair, blood freezing on my gloves. Every muscle trembled, but not from cold, from the weight of everything that refused to end. Below me, the wreck was gone. The crater had swallowed Crane, Sam, Kira, and the contractor whole. 4 ghosts entombed under ice that would never melt. For a moment, I almost pitied them. Almost. Because the truth is, they died the moment they betrayed me. The ice just caught up. I reached into my pocket and felt the drives. 3 of them warm from the fire's residue. 1 cracked, 1 half melted, but 1 still intact. The last one, labeled Borealis Alpha Final. I held it against my chest, breathing slow, and whispered, "You lived." The wind answered, a low hum rolling through the valley, like the earth itself was exhaling. That's when I realized the storm was gone. The silence that followed wasn't mercy. It was judgment. I packed what was left of my supplies, wrapped my coat tighter, and started walking south. The compass needle quivered, but I didn't need direction anymore. The mountains themselves seemed to guide me. Every step crunched with a sound that reminded me I was still here, still breaking the quiet world's skin. Hours passed. The sky lightened from steel to pearl, and somewhere in the distance, I saw movement. Black smoke rising thinly against the white. Civilization, maybe a base, maybe another lie. I laughed under my breath. Even the horizon was testing me. By the time I reached the ridge overlooking the smoke, dusk was bleeding across the sky. Below, a communications outpost, small, old, half-buried. A single radio antenna stood like a broken tooth against the wind. I climbed down, half crawling, half sliding, until my knees hit the frozen ground. Inside, the outpost was silent. Dust, rust, a faint smell of old batteries and oil. But there was power. A generator humming weakly, like it hadn't given up yet. I plugged the drive into the first terminal I found. The screen flickered alive. Lines of code, corrupted files, static. Then, my data. The anomaly graphs, my discovery, alive again, glowing faintly on the cracked monitor. I wanted to cry, but instead I smiled. "Hello, old friend," I whispered. "We're not done." Then I saw the second folder, not mine. It was labeled Arcturus Ops Archive. Curiosity beat exhaustion. I opened it. Encrypted memos, logistics reports, surveillance timestamps, and a series of classified audio notes labeled Calder Recovery. My pulse spiked. I clicked the first. Male voice. Subject Calder presumed dead. Secondary retrieval team dispatched for cleanup. Priority, eliminate material evidence. Female voice. Understood. If she resurfaces. Male voice. Contain. Control narrative. She's unstable. Public will believe it. The recording ended. I stared at the screen, the hum of the generator deepening, like it too was holding its breath. Unstable. That was their word for me, their excuse. Not scientist, not survivor, just the woman who broke the storm. But now I had their words, their confession. And I had the storm's proof. For the first time since that night, my hands stopped shaking. Not from rage, from purpose. I began compiling everything, logs, maps, audio, timestamps, all into one folder. I renamed it The Blizzard Papers. When it finished saving, I wrote one final line into the document. No more silence. And then I connected the transmitter. The signal was weak, the range barely a few kilometers. But if the winds were kind, if the storm still remembered me, it would carry the signal farther than any machine could. Transmitting. Static filled the room, then a tone, a pulse, alive. I closed my eyes, listening to the hum. It was the sound of truth clawing its way out from under the ice. If anyone heard it, even one person, that would be enough. Because stories, once set loose, don't die. They evolve. And I had just unleashed one. Outside, the aurora began to rise, green ribbons twisting across the sky. They looked like veins of light reaching down, touching the earth. I whispered into the wind, "You didn't kill me, you transformed me." The storm didn't answer this time. It didn't have to. It had already given me its name. At first the sound was only static, a dull hiss, broken by fragments of my own voice bouncing back from the transmitter. I thought it had failed. I almost laughed. After all that, after fire, betrayal, ice, and ghosts, the world might never hear a word. Then, through the white noise, came something new. Repeat. Calder transmission received. This is Anchorage Station 7. Do you copy? I froze. Someone was listening. I slammed the table, fumbled with the dial, and spoke into the mic, my voice raw from cold and disbelief. This is Dr. Freya Calder. Repeat. Dr. Freya Calder of Project Borealis. If you hear me, record everything. Arcturus Industries falsified data and attempted. The line cut out, just static again. But it was enough. Someone out there had heard my name. The adrenaline hit like heat. I rewired the backup antenna, connected the generator directly, forcing the machine to push beyond its limits. It sparked, hissed, groaned. But the signal went out stronger, faster, louder. For hours, I repeated the same words. This is Dr. Freya Calder. The Borealis anomaly is real. Arcturus covered it up. They killed my team. Every 20 minutes, the transmitter shut down to cool. Every 21, I turned it back on. Somewhere in that rhythm, I stopped feeling alone. By morning, I heard them again, faint but clear. Dr. Calder, your signal's bouncing across the network. Hold frequency. I laughed, a sound too bright for the room. They'd found me, or maybe the truth had found them. Either way, the silence had broken. I spent the next hours uploading everything. The Blizzard papers, the recordings, the memos, the coordinates. Each one like a heartbeat sent through the storm. The screen flickered, progress bar crawling, but it didn't matter how slow. It only mattered that it moved forward. Then the door groaned. The sound was small, but in that frozen silence, it felt enormous. I turned, slowly, a shape in the doorway, a silhouette, hooded, still, haloed by the faint glow of aurora light behind it. For a second, I thought the storm had come to visit me in person. Then the voice came. You're hard to find, Doctor. I recognized it, soft, broken, familiar. Kira. She looked half dead. Face frostbitten, eyes sunken. One arm bound in torn fabric. No gun, no equipment, just desperation. You're alive, I said flatly. Barely, she rasped. Sam's gone. The ice took him. Crane too. The others. She swallowed. It wasn't supposed to go like this. No, I said. It was supposed to go perfectly. I die, you get the credit, Arcturus gets the patents. Kira shook her head violently, tears freezing on her cheeks. You don't understand. They lied to us too. They said you went insane. They showed us doctored footage, you screaming into the blizzard. I didn't move. Maybe I was screaming, but not because I was insane. Please, she whispered. They'll come for both of us now. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her arm. Underneath the torn sleeve, I saw it. A small black tracking device, blinking faintly. I sighed. Of course they will. I ripped it off her arm, stomped it into the floor, and threw the remains into the fire barrel. She watched me in silence, her expression a strange mix of fear and relief. Freya, she said softly, you can't win this. I looked up from the flames. I already have. The generator flickered again. One last surge before dying completely. But the upload bar on the screen hit 100%. I smiled. It's done. Kira stared at the monitor, realization spreading across her face. You sent it. To everyone, I said. Universities, news outlets, independent researchers. The signal's not just radio. It's satellite now. They'll find it. Her voice broke. You doomed them all. Arcturus will collapse the project, destroy the network. Then let them, I said. Collapse is the sound of lies breaking. Outside, a low hum rose again. Aircraft. Not rescue, not corporate. Something else. The snow vibrated underfoot, and Kira looked at me, terrified. What did you do? I stared out the doorway, watching the lights in the sky shimmer like warning flares. I woke the world, I said. And the world doesn't go back to sleep easily. A voice cracked through the static one last time, distorted but clear enough to send chills down my spine. Transmission confirmed. Calder, stay where you are. Retrieval team inbound, friendly. Friendly, the most suspicious word I'd ever heard. Kira's voice trembled. Are you going to trust them? I looked at the sky, the storm rebuilding itself around the aurora, beautiful and endless. Then I shook my head. I trust the storm more than people. I picked up my pack, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped outside. The air was electric, sharp with the smell of ozone, alive with light. For a moment, I thought I could see the pulse of my transmission, the invisible heartbeat racing outward into the world. And in that moment, I knew. My revenge had turned into revelation. The next morning, I woke to the sound of distant thunder. But it wasn't weather, it was rotors, more aircrafts, dozens, maybe more. I stayed low, crawling to the window. The horizon was crowded with dark specks moving in formation. Not Arcturus logos, but unmarked. Government, maybe, or private military. Either way, they weren't here to rescue me. They were here for the data. Inside the outpost, the lights were dead. The generator had finally given up. But the transmitter still blinked once every few seconds, a faint red heartbeat refusing to stop. I touched the casing gently, whispering, "Keep talking for me." Then I packed what little I had. A half-broken compass, 2 protein bars, the remaining drive, and my recorder. The rest I left. The blizzard papers were already in motion, carried by wind and code alike. Now, I had to stay alive long enough to see what they'd become. By noon, the sky was alive with sound. Aircrafts crisscrossing, voices shouting through megaphones I couldn't understand. Snow kicked up like smoke. I slipped out through the rear trench, crouching low, every breath a careful betrayal of silence. Half a mile out, I reached the ridge again. From there, I could see them landing. Men in tactical suits, faces hidden, weapons drawn. They surrounded the outpost like surgeons around a dying patient. Then, one of them raised a hand to his ear and shouted something over the wind. Seconds later, a controlled explosion lit the entire valley white. The outpost, my last shelter, vanished in fire. I didn't move, couldn't, because in that fire, I saw it. The flare of orange reflecting off the snow, spiraling upward like a second aurora. The files, the signal, everything, gone. But then, through the heat haze, I saw something else. A drone, small, civilian, hovering high, blinking blue. It wasn't theirs. Someone was watching, recording. And when the explosion hit, the drone pulled back, spinning upward, vanishing into the light. Someone had seen the truth burn, and that was enough. I kept moving south for 2 more days. The weather shifted, calmer but colder. At night, I slept inside a collapsed snowcat. At dawn, I heard voices crackle faintly from a salvaged radio. Global feeds report massive data leak linked to Borealis project. Scientists presumed dead. Message verified. Calls for Arcturus inquiry. I pressed my hand to my chest. It was real. The world had heard. By the 3rd day, I reached the coast, a sheet of endless gray where sea and ice kissed without distinction. A small fishing settlement lay below, half abandoned. Roofs buried under snow. Smoke rose from one chimney, the first real sign of human life in weeks. I approached cautiously, dragging my sled behind me. An old man stepped out of the shack, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes squinting. "You look like hell," he said. "I've been there," I replied. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Heard your name on the radio. They say you're dead." I was, I said, briefly. He laughed, not kindly, not cruelly, just the kind of laugh people use when they've outlived too much. You need a ride? I need a signal, I said. He pointed to a rusty antenna jutting from the roof. You'll get one here. The storm carries everything eventually. Inside, the shack smelled like kerosene and fish oil. I sat near the heater, my fingers thawing just enough to move. He handed me a battered tablet linked to an old satellite line. I opened the browser. The world had exploded. Headlines everywhere. Whistleblower Freya Calder exposes Arctic conspiracy. Arcturus stocks collapse amid fraud allegations. The Borealis files, what they tried to bury beneath the ice. I scrolled through articles quoting my transmission, my research, my name. Each one slightly twisted, each one incomplete, but alive. They'd tried to bury me under silence. Now the noise was deafening. The old man poured me coffee, steaming black, and asked, "What will you do now?" I looked out the window, at the frozen sea. The horizon glowing faint green with aurora. I think, I said softly, I'll let the truth keep doing what storms do. What's that? He asked. I smiled faintly. Move. That night, as the world spun and screamed with headlines and panic, I sat in silence. Not the silence of fear, but of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing or running. I was exactly where the world needed me. Alive, dangerous, and unowned. The blizzard papers were no longer mine. They belonged to everyone who'd ever been silenced, to every voice that refused to freeze quietly. And maybe, someday, when the snow melts, people will find what we tried to tell them. That truth, like ice, never really disappears. It only waits for pressure to release it. 3 days after the news broke, the sky above the village filled with helicopters again, not Arcturus this time, but news agencies. They came in waves like vultures circling fresh truth. Reporters, drones, even satellite vans, all desperate to capture the image of the woman who broke the silence. The old fisherman just looked at me, puffed on his pipe, and said, "Guess the storm's famous now." I smiled weakly. Storms usually are, right before they fade. But deep down I knew this storm wasn't fading, it was evolving. By noon, my name was everywhere. Headlines, interviews, conspiracy forums, reaction videos. Half the world called me a hero. The other half, a fraud. Governments launched investigations. Arcturus denied everything, released forged proof of my mental instability. They recycled the same narrative they used to bury me before, calling me delusional, unfit, obsessed. It was like watching the ice reform after it cracked. Truth never melts easily, it just shifts shape. A journalist from New York managed to reach the settlement by snowcat. Her name was Liza Miles. Sharp eyes, sharper mind. She looked at me like someone studying a legend who might still bite. "Dr. Calder," she said, setting up her recorder. "What made you release the blizzard papers now?" I stared out the window at the frozen sea. "Because silence grows teeth if you let it live too long." She smiled faintly. "You realize they'll come for you again." "They already did," I said. "The difference is, this time, I'm not the one hiding." For the first time in months, I told my story. Not into a dying transmitter, not to the wind, but to someone who actually listened. I described the betrayal, the falsified records, the night I was left for dead. I told her about Crane, the recordings, the storm. When I finished, she sat in silence, eyes glistening, the kind of silence that means belief. "This isn't just science," she whispered. "It's a war for truth." "Truth doesn't need soldiers," I said softly. "It just needs survivors." The interview went viral within hours. Clips of my words spread faster than the company's statements could counter. People protested outside Arcturus headquarters, demanding resignations. An emergency Senate hearing was announced. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of noise. The world had found its voice again, but it was screaming too loud to hear what it was saying. Kira found me outside the next morning. She'd stayed hidden in the fisherman's shed, avoiding cameras. Her arm was healing. Her eyes weren't. "They're saying you started all this to take revenge," she said quietly. "That you forged the evidence, that you want Arcturus destroyed." I looked at her for a long time. "They're not wrong about one thing," I said. "I did want revenge. I still do. But that's not what this became." "Then what is it now?" I glanced toward the horizon, where light met ice like a blade. "A mirror, Let them see themselves. By evening, the world had split in two. Court justice for Calder trended beside Betrayal. Stop the lies. One side worshipped me, the other hunted me. I wasn't a scientist anymore, I was a symbol, and symbols don't get to rest. Later that night, the old fisherman knocked on my door. He carried a small, rusted radio. "It's for you," he said. Picked up something strange. I turned the dial. Through static, a familiar male voice whispered. Smooth, confident, venomous. "Dr. Calder, congratulations. You made quite a show, but the truth isn't finished. You released only part of it." I froze. That voice. Crane. "Impossible," I breathed. "You're dead." "Dead," the voice replied, laughing. Such a simple word for someone who built the storm itself. Then, silence. The transmission ended. The radio fell from my hands. Outside, the wind picked up again. A low, rising howl like something ancient remembering its name. Kira rushed in, startled by my expression. "Freya, what is it?" I stared at the radio, still glowing faintly red. "It's not over," I whispered. "The storm's not done with us yet." The radio's red light blinked again. Once, twice, then steadied. Static filled the room like a slow inhale. Kira stood frozen beside me, eyes wide, breath shallow. "Freya, that can't be him," she whispered. I stared at the radio, my reflection warped in its glass dial. "No, but someone wants me to think it is." The hum deepened. Then, the voice returned. "You survived longer than expected," Crane said. "Good. The world needed a villain. You gave it one." My pulse thudded so loud I almost missed the next line. "But do you really think you sent everything?" The generator sputtered, lights flickered, and the recording looped once, then stopped. I slammed my palm against the radio, shouting, "Who's there? Where are you broadcasting from?" Only static, but behind the noise, faintly, a pattern, repeating pulses. Morse code. I grabbed a notepad from the table, scribbling the dots and dashes as they came through the interference. Kira leaned in, whispering,